XLS 38D might be the amendment on the XRP Ledger that brings in this complete wave of institutional adoption. So let me bring you up to speed on what XLS 38 is and why it's the most exciting thing to happen on the XRP Ledger yet, or at least would be, because it hasn't happened yet. Now, I've been hearing lots of conversations all around from lots of different people. XLS 38D seems to keep coming up in smart contract conversations. So I thought, wow, this is smart contracts coming to the XRP Ledger. This is going to be amazing. We're going to be competing with the Ethereum virtual machine, which has basically the vast majority of logic-based smart contracts. And this is going to completely change the game. All the companies that trust Ripple already would automatically like to use Ripple technology in this XRPL. Being smart contracts on the XRPL, this would blow the blockchain through the roof. But in fact, that is not true. This isn't a smart contract amendment or an update on the XRP Ledger. I don't know where people are getting that from, but at least I can speak from my own research and from what I've seen so far, which isn't fully fleshed out. I haven't read every single piece of code on this GitHub page, but I've pulled out the most important pieces. So if there's anything that you can teach me about this, please do teach everyone in the comments, including myself. But it's my understanding that the Ethereum virtual machine works within this highly logical smart contract process. XLS 38D would essentially be allowing for interoperability and functionality across borders, obviously, but across different blockchains. So allowing for the seamless transfer of assets that are not native to the XRPL onto the XRPL. I will explain later on why this is just absolutely wild to think about, and one of the thoughts I've been having really pumps the XRP price up if it occurs. What we're doing with XLS 38D is cross-chain functionality, not smart contracts. And it gets really wild. So let's talk about tokenization, for example. Once you've got everything tokenized, you can have things tokenized on a completely separate blockchain, let's say Algorand, for example, and you could have the value of those assets tokenized on Algorand held as value on the XRPL. We'll get into more on that thought later. But when we talk about the tokenization of all assets, and we think specifically about ISO 20022 assets, it's likely that the tokenization of everything will happen within that realm, or at least the vast majority of it will. And all of a sudden you make all of those tokenized assets on all of the blockchains perfectly interoperable with the XRPL. The XRPL being the blockchain that can send vast amounts of value in 3 to 5 seconds and has all of those mega relationships with big banks and massive financial institutions. You can clearly see how tokenization of everything with this XLS 38D interoperability, cross-chain functionality thing would play into the XRPL's hands, and therefore, of course, the XRP price. But more on that later. Additionally, this whole update or this amendment increases the use cases for the XRPL. And of course, when you increase the use cases on the XRP Ledger, you increase the demand for the XRP Ledger, meaning you increase the demand or the scarcity of the native asset. That's XRP. So we're not talking about smart contracts, but we are talking about the tokenization of assets and having those being perfectly liquid between different blockchains. But we're also talking about, which is the main point of XLS 38D, that allows different blockchains to create their own side chains on the XRP Ledger. Within those side chains, you essentially hold wrapped XRP, or a wrapped version of the native asset of the sender's blockchain. Now you can see in the little diagram here, what you have is a system where you have a locking chain and an issuing chain. And then right above that, you have witnesses to basically witness the transactions, essentially allowing you to send vast amounts of payments in wrapped asset form on the XRPL. Now we've seen wrapped assets on Ethereum, for example, but I've got a theory about wrapped assets in this capacity on the XRPL. I want to get into that in a second. So how the wrapping of these assets works is pretty interesting, and there's some really powerful words in here that I want to share. So I'm going to read this all out loud and then we're going to go through it together. A bridge does not exchange assets between two ledgers. Instead, it locks assets on one ledger, the locking chain, and represents those assets with wrapped assets on the other chain, the issuing chain. A good model to keep in mind is a box with an infinite supply of wrapped assets. Putting an asset from the locking chain onto the box will release a wrapped asset on the issuing chain. Putting a wrapped asset from the issuing chain into the box will release one of the existing lock chain assets back onto the locking chain. There is no other way to get assets into or out of the box. Note that there is no way for the box to run out of wrapped assets. It has an infinite supply. So the interesting part of this for me was the infinite element. There is no limit. There is an infinite amount of wrapped assets that are able to be made within this issuing chain. I'm pretty sure that's something that exists in all wrapped assets in any blockchain. I just found it really interesting to get my head around. I haven't fully got my head around it, so I'd love for someone to explain. But let me get into why I'm quite interested in this, because with all the use cases and all of the assets that could potentially be wrapped from other blockchains and held as wrapped on the XRPL, you have to somehow be able to make good with the value. So let's say you hold $100 million worth of Bitcoin, wrapped Bitcoin, on the XRPL. Doesn't there have to be the equal amount of XRP or value in XRP held as collateral to ensure that that value moves correctly or is kind of backed? Am I thinking straight? Because if that was the case, all of the wrapped assets that were held or at least existing on the XRP ledger at that single moment would have to have the collateral in XRP and the value in XRP to ensure that the value can be transferred properly. Is that right or is that wrong? Yeah, so I'm looking here on GitHub and it says, if the cryptographic proofs are valid, the sidechain can trust the transaction was executed correctly on the sender's blockchain and can proceed to execute the corresponding action on the sidechain, such as issuing additional native assets. Additionally, the bridge can provide collateral in the form of staked tokens or other assets to guarantee its obligations. That's a better way of putting it. And the sidechain can perform periodic audits of the bridge to ensure its continued trustworthiness. So collateral has to be on the other side. What did it say? To guarantee its obligations. This is what I was trying to say in my mind. I'm just reading it here. And another mention of collateral here, it says, finally, the sidechain itself can implement additional verification and validation mechanisms to ensure that only authorized bridges are allowed to issue tokens. For example, the sidechain can require that the bridge holds a specific type of token on the sidechain in order to issue new tokens, or it can require that bridge provides a collateral deposit that is forfeited in the case of fraudulent activity. So it can be kind of coded in here that when you're creating these assets or using these assets for these bridge transfers, that you have to provide collateral. Surely you can only provide collateral in the native asset of the blockchain, being XRP. And here's my thought process if you haven't latched on by now. If people are providing collateral, that means XRP is being taken out of supply and out of use. Even if it is for only a short period of time. I don't know if this is just 3 to 5 seconds or whether it's just you can contractually put it in there. But obviously taking XRP out of the supply with an increased demand and use case for the XRP ledger, the price has to be affected. The price has to go up in that instance. So if collateral deposits have to be provided in these transactions, that is absolute position A1 for XRP, right, with the price, because all the XRP is just going to be taken out of circulation. There's going to be a mass buy-up of XRP just to satisfy these collateral deposits. I think I might be getting too complex with it. I don't know if I'm smart enough to understand this either, but this is very interesting. Of course, my brain is going wild at this point. Yeah, and I've just found something extra interesting here. What you can do on these sidechains basically is you can create an IOU bridge, right? So IOU, money, bridge, right? So it's an IOU to IOU bridge. Any two networks that have an IOU to IOU bridge between them should already have an XRP bridge between them, as a sidechain will need XRP for account reserves and transaction fees. While this could be changed, in the case of the X-Chain Bridge amendment code could also be modified. This makes it simpler to set up an IOU bridge. Regardless of what IOU bridges are, it's interesting that you have to have reserves of XRP for certain bridges. right? And this is kind of what I'm saying with the collateral. You have to have these reserves for the transactions within that sidechain. Therefore, if big banks, for example, set up a sidechain using XLS38D, they set up this massive sidechain as a kind of, let's say even a payment channel between two different blockchains, you kind of have to hold reserves, meaning you have to hold XRP as like superfluous to the amount that you're sending. Superfluous, that sound amazing there. You have to have more assets in there than just required to send the payments. You have to hold reserves. If you have to hold reserves, you have to buy up the XRP. If you have to buy up the XRP, there's less in circulating supply. If there's less in circulating supply and you've got lots of people using the XRPL and that's increasing, the demand is increasing, the scarcity is increasing, the price is increasing. Am I wrong? XLS38D has been a fascinating little mini dive. I'll call it a mini dive. I would love to get all your thoughts. It seems like there's some news coming. I don't know, there's some news coming. I think a reversal's coming. I think Ripple could be announcing their IPO very soon. If that is happening, congratulations to everyone that was in this community that got involved in our mastermind section. We'll talk about that more later. But if we get an S1 filed by Ripple in the next week or so, we're looking at we may be weeks away from Ripple going public, and that's just going to be a wild moment for everyone in here. Thank you all so much for watching. Stay emotionless. Have you been watching the videos, by the way? Here's 2 videos to go and watch. It's their marketing, it's the promotional push for, I'm not going to say it out loud, but I think you've gathered by now. The big advert's coming tomorrow, then the following day, it all opens. Stay emotionless.